The outlook for Logan Airport is more growth in air traffic and economic vitality, but many people working for the airport's contractors see a long struggle to make ends meet. That's why they've been trying to get a raise in their minimum wage to $15 an hour. The campaign is led by the Union for Service Workers, 32BJ, SEIU, with support from two state legislators. We'd like to welcome 32BJ's New England Director, Roxana Rivera, and one of the legislators, the State Representative from East Boston, Adrian Madaro. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Chris.
Thank you.
I'll start with Roxana. Massport says that these workers at the airport, they're already making a minimum of $11 an hour, and they say that's pretty good, but how do the workers see that kind of money?
So obviously for someone that lives here in Boston, that's not enough. And in other airports, actually, these same workers working for many of the same, outsourced by many of the same airlines operate here at Boston Logan Airport, actually earn more livable wages in those cities. And we think that the airlines and the contractors can do the same here so that folks can make ends meet here in Boston, in the surrounding area.
And I guess one sign of how livable the wages are is, I guess, how many workers in 32BJ have a tough time staying in East Boston?
So we have a couple of thousand of workers that that live in East Boston, but over the recent years, folks have had to look elsewhere to live just because of, as Massport buys up more land and really changes those communities, they've had to look for other places where they can afford the rent. Mm-hmm.
Representative Madaro, what about legislating and targeting a minimum wage this way? Are you worried about that being a precedent in any way?
Well, I think there's a movement nationally, not only here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but across the country to push for a $15 an hour wage floor. So we really thought that the time to strike on something like this was now. Much of the talk has centered around folks, particularly in fast food workers and those in the retail industry. But there hasn't been much talk about those hardworking men and women that SEIU 32BJ represents. Many of these folks are folks who are my constituents. They're my friends, my neighbors, and they deserve dignity. They deserve respect, and they deserve a livable wage. And that's why we're fighting for this.
Coming back to Roxana Rivera, the other thing is here the quality of the workforce. How do you feel higher wages would affect that?
Well, the airlines right now outsource to a very low bid system. So basically they're getting contractors that are not complying with the law, that the turnover because of the low wages and poor working conditions, there's this high turnover. So we don't believe that adds or contributes to better safety at the airport. It's if they lift the wages, they encourages companies to comply more with the law, and also strengthens that turnover so that you can, boost productivity for the airport and just have well-trained staff, which everybody relies on as they go through the airport.
Well, I know some of these jobs are difficult, they're onerous, but and maybe unpleasant, but at the same time, I guess you got to do it right. Otherwise, there could be some, safety problems, right?
Definitely. So these workers provide a critical service for, millions of passengers that have just this past year gone through Boston Logan Airport. And so we think it's important for workers to make a livable wage and for for them to be able to provide good service.
Representative, another dimension here is that any higher pay for the service workers might have to be passed on, I guess, to the airlines maybe. So is there any concern about that?
Perhaps there would have to be some passed on to the airlines, but the reality is, I see it as a win-win not only for the hardworking men and women who deserve this, but it's also a win for the airlines and for the airport itself. We are not only the transportation hub for Boston, but realistically for New England. And the millions of passengers that come through Logan Airport deserve to have a great experience. That is their welcome to Boston. And when you have employees that are treated well and fairly and have good wages, that's going to come through in their productivity and work. They're going to be happier in work. They're going to be proud of their jobs. And that's going to be experienced by those visitors at Logan Airport. So I think, not only the employees win, but also the travelers through Logan Airport win.
Roxana Rivera, this is also about people raising families. And I certainly heard that there was one worker who was struggling to send one of her children to college. So I guess this is part of what they're talking about with these.
Again, workers, teach their children, just like everybody else, if you work hard, you'll be able to make, do. And we have workers that have expressed those principles on their kids, yet they make it into colleges like Lesley College and find out later that they can't afford to go, even with financial aid. It's too costly, and parents are not able to, help them. And so I think that those are stories that we hear over and over again, as well as just making ends meet on a daily basis, providing the food, rent. There's a lot of workers that still rely on state subsidies to make ends meet, or actually have to find themselves in homeless shelters, month to month, given the low wages, although they're working hard every day at the airport.
Representative, we're talking, I guess, in many cases here about immigrant workers, and that's not too far back in your family.
Yeah, I'm first generation. My dad came from Italy 35 years ago.
And Roxana, what about this? I mean, because this is people who are coming here. Just the civil disobedience involved in this campaign. Talk about that.
So, workers, we don't believe this is a hopeless fight. Workers are thirsty, and they're, ready to, fight for justice, and they've marched and they've gone on strike. And recently on MLK Day, we marched into the airport terminals, and a few of us did risk arrest. In the likes of Dr. Martin Luther King. There's just, we know, now that we know what's happening, we cannot not know. And so it's important for us. We believe that to win this fight, and we believe it's a fight for justice, not only for immigrant workers, but, the workers are mainly immigrants and people of color that live, in Boston and the surrounding area. And so, yes.